Moving swiftly on, the next item of business today is a member's business debate on motion number 9000 in the name of George Adam on Scotland's first year as a fair trade nation. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I invite those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible, and I invite members who are leaving Parliament and indeed the public gallery to do so quickly and quietly, please. Now call on George Adam to open the debate. Mr Adam, you have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I see it as a particular honour to lead this fair trade debate today, 1 year on after Scotland historically became a fair trade nation. Basically, for me, fair trade is not just about becoming a fair trade town, a fair trade county, a fair trade nation. That's a starting point. It's actually about what we can actually do in the world to make a difference and to change people's lives and how we actually, consumers, actually purchase goods in the whole of the world. You know, in my own town in Paisley, my hometown, my own constituency, it was originally started by Labour Promise. Can't remember his name at the moment. You know, it was actually John McDowell, Labour Provost John McDowell, who actually started the ball rolling for us. And there was always cross-party. It was always something that everyone worked towards. Then eventually, when the SNP administration came on, we went for the county status, and again it wasn't just about getting the county status, it was about making sure that we delivered on much more than just that. It's not just about box ticking, it's not just about getting the stamp of approval, it's about making a difference. Now, it originally comes from local groups working very hard in their own specific areas, churches, community groups, all working very small in their areas, working towards trying to make a difference in the world. Some people may say, you know, it's a bunch of do-gooders trying to put their ideals onto others, but it's when you see the difference it can make in countries that are affected by this. And as the chairman of the cross-party group in fair trade, along with James Kelly, I can say that we've seen the difference in many of the people who have come along to our actual group and spoke to us last year. In the past year, we've had people over from Malawi, we've had people last night from various other countries where they are having the same difficulties in Nepal. Now, last year it was Henry Kalumba and Howard Muswakwa, sorry if I get the names wrong, from Malawi, who were talking about Kilimanjaro rice, and they were telling us their story and how difficult it was for them to work as a cooperative to ensure that they could actually deliver their products and make a change for their young people, their children, to be educated and get an opportunity in life. And they explained to us how as working as that cooperative it transformed their life, not just in the fact that how they delivered their rice, not just in how they brought it to market. They went from actually balancing it on their head to mechanising, to actually taking the rice to the marketplace. It also made a difference in the next generation, the young children, the people involved in the family, being able to afford to take them to go for education. And that's what this is all about. That's what fair trade works. That's what makes it exciting for us who are involved in the fair trade movement, is when you see and hear the difference it makes. It's not just buying that bottle of red wine that's got a fair trade stamp on it. It's not just buying the chocolate. It's actually seeing the difference it can make in these people's lives and the ideals. But yesterday we had some young women who came along from Nepal, and it was about the Get Paper industry. They make handmade paper products as a cooperative. And they basically make all types of, using waste paper, they actually use all types to deliver things here. And Anita Roderick's company initially gave them the opportunity with the Body Shop to actually package. Now, that was her company's ideal of making sure that everything was done properly. Oh, if we lived in a world that had Anita Roderick's ideals, because that's the aim we want in the future. But they actually went so far as having the packaging that they produced to have products that were fairly produced and fairly traded as well. And that makes such a massive difference. And I think one of the things I would say is we have to ensure that we support these things, not just, but tell everyone the difference it can make in the world. This is not just us sitting there doing something good and patting ourselves in the back, whether it be as a fair trade nation, town or a county or an individual. This is us actually looking at the difference we can make and the type of world we want to live in. Well, this company has worked since 1989, and they've got to a stage where they now are taking young women and educating them. In a country in Nepal where there is a caste system that they've dealt with, they've also had to deal with young women not being encouraged to actually go into full-time education, and now they've managed to transform a lot of lives. They now have 5 schools that they've done through this cooperative, through this business. Now that, to me, is the exciting part of how you can actually make a difference in people's lives. You know, yes, I will.
I'm grateful for the member giving way. He's mentioned food and paper and drink and a number of issues. Would you say that clothing is an area that we need to do more in fair trade?
I would agree, because one of the things I was going to say, I would agree with John Mason, one of the things I was going to say is I was attracted to fair trade as a young man because the sportswear manufacture is a particularly difficult situation. I know the Commonwealth Games is working with the Fair Trade Foundation to try and be a fair trade games, but we still have a difficulty where a pair of trainers or a T-shirt for a sports manufacturer will cost hundreds of pounds potentially, yet the actual production of that will be done for pennies. And I know the Minister has given examples in the past with regards to footballs. For an example, in Pakistan can be built from the same factory, but the costs involved will be absolutely phenomenal by the time they get over here. And I think that's somewhere where we have to look, as in sportswear manufacturer. Yes.
Kenny Gibson, and put your microphone up, please. Thank you. What? Pardon, Mr. Gibson, please. Is your card in? Is your card in?
I'll just switch to the next one.
That's it, working now. Right, go ahead.
Will the member agree with me that what is important is to have, with regard to fair trade, is not just that we pay a decent price for produce, but we have manufacturing in the core countries. I attended the 10th anniversary of Fair Trade Village, the first fair trade community in Scotland, which is in my constituency, just last Saturday. And we had manufacturers who were from Ecuador, and they had actually not just exported plantain, but they were actually growing it, packing it and transporting it, therefore giving their community the opportunity to learn new skills and to join and to add value to their community other than just being a kind of primary producer.
Remaining 15 seconds, Mr. Adam, please.
Okay. The member makes a valid point with regards to the whole production process. I think it's something we have to address because there are so many difficulties when it comes to fair trade and actually trying to make sure, because some of the issues that I would ask the Minister and say that some of the things that have come over in the past year where we'll be doing this is procurement is still an ongoing issue. I know we have the procurement bill, but procurement is still an issue for a lot of people in Scotland. In the public sector, we need to find a way to be able to tap into that and ensure we can do that.
As you draw to a close, please.
I will do, Presiding Officer.
Yes.
The Fair Trade band and logo, there's many positives and negatives with regard to that. There's things that are fairly traded, but it's difficult to actually get the Fair Trade brand. The Killenbarrow rice is an example. They have not got the Fair Trade logo because it's very expensive and they have to say to their individuals to vote for it. In closing, Presiding Officer, just if you give me a quick second, I would just like to say that this is about more than just saying we're a fair trade nation, patting ourselves in the back. This is our Scots values and how we see ourselves in the world and the type of world that we want to live in.
Thank you very much.
Is what fair trade
I now
is
call
about.
the next speaker. You must stop, Mr. Adam. Thank you. Next speaker is Patricia Ferguson, to be followed by John Lamont.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and may I offer my congratulations to George Adam on securing today's debate and giving us the opportunity to celebrate the first anniversary of Scotland, a fair trade nation. It wasn't easy to become a fair trade nation, nor should it have been. It needed the efforts of churches and schools, colleges and universities, individuals and local authorities to make it happen. But as George Adam rightly said, it was never a tick-box exercise, and we need to continue our efforts if we are to live up to the commitment we have made and maintain that status. My home city of Glasgow became a fair trade city in 2006 and successfully renewed its status in 2013. And as part of that process, a survey identified that there are now 200 shops and catering outlets selling fair trade products, a significant number, I'm sure the presiding officer will agree. But I want to talk about an initiative the City Council, and particularly the Lord Provost Sadie Docherty, has taken forward, and which is very much helping to keep the issue alive. In June 2013, as we've heard, 2 Malawi rice farmers visited Glasgow, amongst other places, as part of a tour organised by the importers Just Trading Scotland. Those 2 farmers, Howard Masuku and Susan Nintende, visited a number of schools, including St Roch Secondary in my constituency. They also visited the City Chambers, where they met with the Deputy Lord Provost. Howard and Susan explained that in Malawi, secondary school education is not free, but that if a Malawian rice farmer can sell 90 kilos of rice, he or she will have sufficient profit to send one of their children to school. Glasgow City Council agreed that it would develop a way of assisting this campaign, which has culminated in the Lord Provost's Malawi Rice Challenge. Within the City Council's departments and its alios, staff are buying and selling rice to friends and family, with a target of selling 1,081 kilo bags of rice, generating thereby enough profit to allow 12 children to go to high school. Now, Presiding Officer, Glaswegians, as you'll know, like a challenge, and I'm told that in Exchange House alone there are only a couple of bags of rice left, and that competition to see which department can sell the most rice is fierce. Indeed, it might be the Lord Provost's rice challenge to some, but to others it's nothing less than rice wars. But it seems to me that this is an enjoyable and imaginative way to demonstrate the value of the fair trade premium and to get more people interested in the issue at the same time. And of course, the end result is that at least 12 young Malawians will be given the gift of education. But it doesn't end there, because many of the bags of rice bought by City Council employees have then been donated to food banks, in effect doubling the value of a simple bag of rice. I would want to congratulate Just Trading Scotland, the Lord Provost and everyone who's been involved in this challenge, and I look forward to seeing just how much rice is actually sold and, more importantly, how many young Malawians can be helped to continue their education as a result. This Parliament, Presiding Officer, can be proud of the role it's played in encouraging fair trade in Scotland, and I would like to suggest today that we might go a step further and begin to sell fair trade products in the Parliament shop. I'm not aware that we do so at the moment. Now, it could start with a small number of items, like the attractive paper products from the Get Paper project in Nepal that George Adams has mentioned, and it needn't take up much space, but would be an excellent way to demonstrate our ongoing commitment and the importance of fair trade to us and, more importantly, to our friends in other countries. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now call on John Lamont to be followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too begin by congratulating George Adam for securing this important debate. I am pleased that we are recognising the achievement of the Fair Trade Forum in increasing public awareness of Fair Trade Fortnight and indeed fairly traded products. Scotland should be proud to be leading the way in promoting sustainable production and commerce. Fair trade is all about making sure that products exported internationally from developing countries to developed countries are produced under fair conditions. That means promoting the payment of fair prices, safe and healthy working conditions and responsible environmental practices. In a sense, it is unfortunate that the fair trade movement is even needed and that corporate responsibility and responsible trading and sourcing are not already commonplace. However, it is a positive sign that sales of fair trade products are increasing year on year and today exceed £1.5 billion in the United Kingdom alone. 1 in every 3 bananas sold in the UK is fair trade, almost a half of all bagged sugar sold in the UK is fair trade certified, and a quarter of all coffee sold in the UK is also fair trade certified. For me, this shows that people are getting the message and are increasingly receptive to the work, ethos and overall aims and objectives of the fair trade movement. We have heard that last year Scotland officially became a fair trade nation, having reached the required number of councils, cities and people that support the fair trade movement. I have attended several fair trade events across the borders, giving credit to those borders groups which have contributed to Scotland being awarded this coveted fair trade status. Ever since Selkirk was originally awarded fair trade status over a year ago, I am pleased to report that support has been growing across the borders for the fair trade movement. A number of other border towns are looking to follow Selkirk's lead, and a Borders Fair Trade Steering Group has been established, so I hope that the Borders will soon be designated as a fair trade region. This would strengthen Scotland's credentials as a fair trade nation and show that we are all supporting producers for getting a better deal. Of course, it's not only in the borders that fair trade is gaining support. During last week and this, across the country, events are being held to promote the work of the Fair Trade campaign. From Selkirk to St Andrews, from Airdrie to Aberdeen, communities across Scotland will be learning about the great work being done by the fair trade movement and how they can get involved. Fair trade is the only way we can guarantee a fair deal for food producers, who so often get squeezed and left with little money for what they make. Through this initiative, many people in developing countries are now receiving far more money for their goods, and it's important that we do what we can to support them. Too often, Deputy Presiding Officer, too often at the checkout in shops, we are more concerned about the price tag than we are about the origin of the products that we are buying and the effort that goes into their production. One of the key achievements of the Fair Trade Foundation was to set a minimum price that a buyer of fair trade products has to pay to a producer organisation. Most products, including coffee, cocoa, tea and bananas, have been set a fair trade minimum price that covers the cost of sustainable production. This ensures that the local producers are not squeezed out of the market by larger producers more able to bear the burden of reduced profit margins. However, fair trade is not just about prices, it is also about standards which ensure that products are produced and traded under fair and environmentally responsible conditions. Deputy Presiding Officer, whether it's buying items with the official Fair Trade logo on them or drumming up support at your local school, office or community group, anyone can help to support fair trade, and it's our responsibility in this Parliament to lead by example. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now call on Fiona MacLeod to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I join with everyone else in the Chamber in thanking George Adam for bringing this very important debate before the Parliament today. It's just a shame that we don't have more time to explore in more depth. I thought George Adams' impassioned explanation of the benefits of fair trade that go beyond commerce and into actually supporting the communities was a very important message to take out from this debate today. I remember my own journey in fair trade beginning back in the 80s, I'm sure with many other people in the Chamber, when we didn't buy oranges from South Africa. And that very small act that many of us made as a political but also a commercial act is now become, as the fair trade standard, a coherent worldwide movement for social justice rather than just an attempt at protest. And given George Adams' explanation of how important it is for communities abroad involved in fair trade, I would like to concentrate on some of the initiatives in my own constituency of Strathkelvin and Bearsden, where we see the value of working in our community to support communities across the world. Now, I'm short of time, but I was able to, just off the top of my head this morning, find 9 different fair trade initiatives happening across Strathkelvin and Bearsden. Eastern Bartonshire became a fair trade zone in October 2007. Lenzie became a fair trade town in April 2013. Bearsden and Mulgai have a working group started in 2012. We're nearly there, about to put our application in. Last year, Ed Cycle Co-op held a festival which was fair trade. Lenzie Fair Trade Town are holding a fair trade baking competition this Saturday. Guess who's actually going there to be judging? I'm not a baker, as my mum would be one of the first to tell you, but I'm good at eating it, so I will judge on that. George Adam was telling us about, and so did Patricia Ferguson, about the woman that came from Nepal to talk to the cross-party group last night from the Get Paper industry. And for International Women's Day in Kirkintilloch, the women are coming to talk to us and explain to us as a community how important it is that my community supports their community in Nepal. George Adam has referred to Paisley's Just Trading Scotland. Of course, it is in partnership with the Coach House in Balmore in my constituency. But to say that is not just to do the boasting. Over £1 million in that time has been raised through fair trade trading to be able to be put back into these communities. Perhaps one of the areas that I would like to try and concentrate on for my constituency is the East Bartonshire nurseries between 2012 and 2013 piloted being fair trade nurseries. And that was so successful that the Fair Trade Forum are now going to roll that out across Scotland. And I think there's at least 8 other local authorities looking to do this. And I think that is so important, because you're never too young to be a responsible citizen, even at 3 and 4. But also when you at 3 and 4 are learning about fair trade, you're taking that message home to your parents and your grandparents and taking that message forward. Procurement, I think, is a very important issue in this, and I know George Adam didn't have enough time to go into this. We talked about it in the procurement bill debate last week. One of my constituencies, Angela Oakley, in response to John Mason's intervention, has been looking at fairly traded and fairly procured school and protective clothing. And that is something that I hope through the procurement bill, with its, it was so interesting that we all accept that this is the next step forward to look at fairly traded and ethically traded procurement. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I think we've come a long way from the days when I was refusing to buy South African oranges. And it's about helping Scotland here, working to help across the nation, because Scotland is a nation that is a good global citizen. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now call on Liam MacArthur, to be followed by Roderick Campbell.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I join with others in congratulating George Adam on securing this debate, allowing us to recognise, indeed to celebrate, the achievement of Scotland attaining fair trade nation status. Although I think Patricia Ferguson was absolutely right to point to the great deal of work that has gone in across the country in getting to this point. It is reflected, as many speakers have indicated, in action happening at a very local level, and I'm sure it will come as no surprise that I want to spend my time reflecting on some of the work done in Orkney. Westray and Papa Westray were, I think, very much in the vanguard. It was a privilege for me to be at the launch of their bid to attain Fair Trade Island status. It was obvious at that stage the genuine enthusiasm right across the community in all ages for that objective. And I don't think it's any surprise to me that Westray School has achieved Fair Trade Achiever status, which I understand is the highest award under the new scheme of awards for schools. And I don't think any coincidence either that Westray's links through the school, through the church, through the wider community with Malawi, and particularly with the district of Chiolo, I think has informed a lot of the activity that's happened on the ground. The Minister will be aware of our mutual friend Kester Chiwalo's recent visit to Orkney and to Scotland, highlighting the benefits of fair trade to the community he belongs to. And following in those footsteps, the schools I attended in Sandy and Kirkwall Grammar School have achieved their own landmarks. Sandy achieved fair trade school status in August last year. And again, the links with Malawi there are very strong, in that case with the community around Minga. And Kirkwall Grammar School achieved fair trade status last month, and that, I think, came on the back of a year or more of activity, both in the school and in the wider community, led by the driving force, Theo Owembe, who explained in an email to me the benefits that this has delivered. He said it's great for KGS, putting it at the heart of the movement for change. It's great for young people because it's fun and is part of something happening all over the world. And it's great for farmers who are earning a fair price and feeling the support of people on the other side of the world. KGS was commended by the Fair Trade Foundation in particular for its use of social media and for the interaction globally with supporters of fair trade, but they're also acting very locally as well. I was in Kirkwall Town Centre last Saturday, where young musicians from KGS were entertaining shoppers while others were handing out leaflets. Thanks to the efforts of Harry Sanderson, an ardent supporter of the fair trade movement, I've now written to my colleague Vince Cable, highlighting the need to increase the proportion of fair traded bananas that are imported into this country. But the commitment obviously goes far wider than that, beyond the schools, more broadly within Orkney. And I should pay tribute to the work of Orkney Islands Council, who I think have played a leading role, and it was acknowledged by the Foundation, have led a genuinely community-led campaign. Orkney has achieved fair trade zone status less than 15 months after the setting up of the steering group. And as Jill Smee, a leading light in that movement, explained, the work linking promotion of locally produced food, drink and crafts with those of fair traded status has been a key plank to their campaign under the banner Buy Fair and Buy Local in Orkney. This has resulted in Crantit dairy milk being used in fair traded coffee, fair traded chocolate on Orkney ice cream. I'm conscious that we're running up to lunchtime and that I should probably stop there. But examples, I'm sure, as the Minister would agree, of how that collaborative action, that better together, if you will, can allow us to have the best of both worlds. In conclusion, can I congratulate George Adam again on bringing this important debate to the Parliament. I think there are exciting times ahead as we extend the work we're doing under Fair Trade Nation status, and I look forward to the Minister's comments. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now call on Roderick Campbell to be followed by James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate George Adam on securing the business slot for such an important issue, not only for Paisley, important as it is, but for the wider world. Scotland's status as a fair trade nation is something we can all be proud of a year on. However, we should be equally proud of the efforts of communities across Scotland for the work they have done to make their towns and villages fair trade settlements, whether it be in Lenzie, Orkney, Selkirk or Glasgow. Turning to my own constituency, Cooper has been a fair trade town since 2007. St Andrews is in its 9th year, having been established on St Andrews Day in 2005. And Fife as a whole is, of course, a fair trade council area. I think there are nearly 100 fair trade towns, villages and zones around Scotland at the moment, and many more are striving for that accolade. And it's those individual community efforts that link up to afford Scotland as a whole the title of Fair Trade Nation. So why is fair trade so important? A poll last year showed that 9 in 10 Scots are aware of the concept of fair trade. People recognise that fair trade at its most basic level means exactly as its name suggests. We know that encouraging fair trade is an absolutely essential part of tackling and eradicating poverty in many of the world's poorest countries. The Scottish Fair Trade Forum has identified 3 key areas of sustainable development which together encompass the concept of fair trade: social development, economic development and environmental development. All 3 are enshrined in the Scottish Government's International Development Framework, with the Minister for External Relations and International Development having made high-profile visits to Malawi and Zambia in recent months to further those aims. And I look forward to hearing his thoughts in his concluding remarks. Of course, as we know, the Sustainable Economic Development strand of the Scotland and Malawi Partnership and Malawi Development Programme puts a significant focus on the important role of fair trade in growing a more prosperous future for Malawi, a country with which Scotland has had a close and enduring relationship since 1859, when David Livingstone travelled there. In my own constituency of North East Fife, the St Andrews Fair Trade Town campaign is working hard to promote the cause of fair trade, and last year managed to ensure that the fair trade status was renewed. The group have produced a fair trade directory of shops, restaurants, cafes, community organisations, workplaces, visitor accommodation and wholesalers around the town, and during this fair trade fortnight they will be handing out their directory to shoppers in one of the town's supermarkets. The group are also keen to promote local businesses that trade fairly, whether or not they use the official fair trade logo, for whatever reason, if they choose not to. And of course, the University of St Andrews has developed its own fair trade policy, with student societies working together with the university administration to deliver an ethical approach to procurement, which extends from the highest levels right down to things like the use of fair trade products in catering at university functions. In Cooper, we had a banana hour on Saturday morning. This themed event allowed people to exchange banana recipes and purchase fair trade goods in recognition of Fair Trade Fortnight. These and hundreds of other events around Scotland prove that as a grassroots approach to encouraging fair trade, it's actually working. And as we increasingly realise the importance of equitable trade, fighting climate change and ensuring people in developing countries are paid a fair wage, we see how the concept of fair trade has never been more relevant. It truly is an idea whose time has come. It's certainly not bananas, nor even all about bananas. And I hope that this trend will continue and that more communities around Scotland will be inspired by the initiatives around the country to establish their own fair trade status and help keep Scotland a fair trade nation. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
And thank you. Now call on James Kelly, after which we'll move to the closing speech from the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and a I'd like to start by congratulating my fellow co-convener George Adam of the Fair Trade Group on securing the debate today, marking the first anniversary of Scotland as a fair trade nation. I'd also like to welcome Calderwood Primary from my constituency to the gallery. Calderwood Primary, through the years, has taken an interest in fair trade and has provided a number of pupils who have gone on to be active in fair trade groups in Cambuslang and Rutherglen. So it's great that they're here to witness today's debate. I think it is important to mark the first anniversary of Scotland as a fair trade nation because there has been a fair bit of activity throughout the country to celebrate that. I remember one particular event in Perth where hundreds of fair trade activists attended and held a number of stalls and celebrations to mark that landmark. But I think it's not only important to mark the anniversary, I think it's important to recognise the contribution that fair trade makes and what it actually means to the communities who trade goods into Scotland. And there was a very good practical example of that last night at the cross-party group in fair trade. As other colleagues have mentioned, the group from Nepal, Get Paper Industry, and how successful they had been in growing their fair trade product. But it wasn't just that, it was the effect that it had in their community. They were able to tell the story of how the schooling in the area had been very basic if you went back 20 years ago. And in actual fact, many of the young women didn't get any schooling at all. And the success of the fair trade group had meant that not only had many young women been able now to get into education, but the facilities had vastly improved, and they were able to demonstrate that through their presentation. So that shows you the lesson that it's not just about getting a fair trade price, it's also about the impact that it has in countries throughout the world that we purchase fair trade groups from. So you link that back to Scotland and back to groups like my own groups in Rutherglen and Cambuslang. And I think there's been a real momentum that's built up in this through the years. Recognition of fair trade in Scotland in opinion polls was only at 64% in 2006, but has now grown to 87%. And that shows you how much of an impression that is made. And in my local area, that's seen Rutherglen and Cambuslang towns achieve fair trade status through the hard campaigning work of local churches, schools, community groups and young and old alike coming together. One of those groups that has been very successful are Stonelaw High, who have traded £160,000 in fair trade products and are one of the most successful school groups, not only in Scotland but throughout the UK. I think it's important also not just to mark the anniversary, but to keep the momentum going and to look at what we can do going forward. And I think the procurement bill currently going through Parliament, which deals with public contracts to the value of £10 billion, gives us an opportunity not only to showcase fair trade products, but to ensure that we properly promote them through our own local procurement practices. And summing up, Deputy Presiding Officer, I congratulate George Adam on his debate. I think we need to learn the lessons of recent years and the first year as a fair trade nation and move forward with great momentum.
Many thanks. I call on Minister Humza Yousaf. 7 minutes are thereby, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What a great honour to have the opportunity to close this debate on behalf of the Scottish Government. My thanks, of course, to George Adam for bringing this debate to the Parliament, but also for his personal commitment to fair trade, which started long before his election to this chamber. I know when he was in the local authority, he was very keen in promoting this issue, as he said in his opening remarks. Some excellent contributions across the chamber, I thought, as well, and I will reflect upon them as I go through my remarks, and also add my welcome to Calderwood Primary from James Kelly's constituency. I'm delighted they are here. The Scottish Government has funded the Scottish Fair Trade Forum since 2007 because of the importance that we see in fair trade, not just the products, but of course the effects that they have throughout the supply chain. That's why I'm very pleased to be able to announce that we've agreed to continue their funding until 2017 to enable them to develop further support for fair trade across all sections of Scottish society. The Scottish Fair Trade Forum were instrumental in driving forward the agenda to Scotland becoming a fair trade nation, an accolade we achieved last year, and the 25th of February saw us mark 1 year since that fantastic achievement. But since then, as James Kelly just said in his remarks, we've continued to build support for fair trade throughout our work with the Scottish Fair Trade Forum. In the last 12 months, 5 new towns have achieved fair trade status, 18 towns have renewed their status, 2 new local authority areas, Inverclyde and indeed Orkney, have achieved fair trade zone status, and 2 further local authorities are preparing to submit their applications. A further college has achieved fair trade status, and 3 more are actively pursuing status. An additional 153 schools are registered with the Fair Trade Schools programme, which brings the total number of schools in Scotland registered to the programme to more than 1,000. All of this demonstrates that fair trade and our commitment to fair trade is not the remit just of government, of politicians, of MSPs, but actually has been driven by the people on the ground. Churches, as has been mentioned, local authorities, libraries, organisations, charities, but also schools, which are incredibly important. And I was at Waldeswell Primary School in the northeast of Glasgow last week, and this job, if nothing else, presiding officer, is extraordinarily varied. And I was there judging the best dressed banana competition. And I'm loath to say, in fact, that unfortunately he may be the President of the United States, but Barack O'Banana did not win the competition. That accolade went to Jimmy, the Scottish Jamaican bobsleigh banana. It is varied, as I say. In just over 8 years, awareness of fair trade, as people have said throughout the Chamber, has grown, with that recent opinion poll saying that nearly 9 out of 10 Scots were aware of the fair trade mark. And people, what I am really impressed with is the people-to-people relationship that fair trade brings. It's not just a case of buying a chocolate bar, a coffee or a banana because of the fair trade mark, but the links that have been created between people and communities that probably wouldn't have met otherwise, I think, is the real benefit I think that Scotland gets from her relationship in the fair trade movement. And Ray MacArthur mentioned our mutual friend, Pastor Kester. I was 1 week in the job when I got to meet Pastor Kester, and here I had a gentleman from the Chiolo Highlands telling me, Minister, these are the places in Orkney that you must go to see, because he'd seen more of Orkney than I had seen. But there was a true relationship he'd built up with the Presbytery in Westray and the community there as well. I had the great pleasure, as Roderick Campbell said, of travelling to some of the countries where we are committed to fair trade: India, Pakistan, Malawi and Zambia, where I saw firsthand the importance. And I can sit here and I can tell you that I saw the difference that it made, but truthfully, presiding officer, until you see for yourself and you hear from those, as the cross-party group did yesterday, the difference that makes in people's lives, you really cannot comprehend it. Being told by a group of women in Malawi who were making batiks, they were telling me how they're fairly produced products, they were getting a fair price for what they were doing, but actually the worth of that was not just making these wonderful products, but actually the fact that they could send their children to school, an opportunity they wouldn't have had, something that you and I would take for granted. So really the impact of it, I think the more people that we can get from countries that are benefiting from that relationship to tell their story, certainly the better. That Scotland is a caring nation, of course, as part of our values, as was being said by Fiona MacLeod. It's in our villages and towns and cities that a great many people will show their commitment by doing what they can to make a difference. Whether it's holding fair trade bake sales, I expect an invitation from the member, no doubt, to help our judge, be it film showings, as has been hosted in the Bridge of Allen, the Big Banana Walk, which took place in Johnstone, or the Smoothie Bike, which visited the member's constituency in Paisley last Friday. I'm sure he was pedalling the bike very hard. Specific questions that have been raised, presiding officer, one in particular has been the procurement bill mentioned by James Kelly, and also George Adam as well, and the achievement of fair trade nation status was only the beginning. We must continue to see and explore what we can do with the powers that we have in this Parliament. And of course, one such action is to promote and increase the uptake of fair trade and ethical procurement in the public sector. And this can be achieved primarily through guidance and secondary legislation. However, the Scottish Government has demonstrated our commitment by today lodging an amendment to the Procurement Reform Bill currently going through the Parliament that will require public authorities in preparing a procurement strategy to include a statement on their policy on the procurement of fairly and ethically traded goods and services. I think that will be something that will be welcomed by members across the chamber. But of course, as the Deputy First Minister this week met with Christian Aid, with SCIAF to discuss ethical procurement, as she said, in this respect our mind will always be open. In closing, I would like to... of course, yes, I'll take it.
Very briefly, I certainly welcome the announcement the Minister's just made, but given the importance of supermarkets to the volume of food and goods that are sold, is there more that needs to be done, particularly at times where household budgets are under pressure, to ensure that what we don't see is a reining back from any commitment to fair trade, and indeed efforts to try and extend further the breadth of fair trade products that are retailed through our larger supermarkets?
Minister.
Yes, I think the member makes a fair point, and I'm happy to explore avenues by which we can do that. There's some things that we can do through primary, secondary, and even through legislation, but there are other avenues that we must explore, and I would be happy to have that discussion. In closing, Presiding Officer, I'd like to thank the member for bringing this motion, but also for all the members for their fantastic contributions. Just as James Kelly was saying, I too attended a festival of fair trade in Perth. And I remember that very well because I came out of it having purchased fair trade candy floss, chocolate crisps, and the basic message is that supporting such a good cause has never been so tasty, so we should continue doing so. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Well, thank you all for your contributions to this debate, and suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30.